Guys, welcome to the First Responder Playbook. We're going to flip the script today. I've got Sergeant V back with me, and I'm going to let him interview me today, and we're going to talk about, the reasons I started the podcast, I got in law enforcement, and how my career has progressed. So, Sergeant V, you're the interviewer. Let's get it started.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed your podcast, and I just thought it was appropriate that your audience finally get to know who is Brent, right?
Yep.
What makes Brent tick? And so there's an old quote. It was very famous among the military, but it's kind of spiraled from there, and I've heard a lot of other famous people say it, and it's, if not me, then who? If not now, then when? So that's my question for you. When you first started law enforcement, when you first had that little glimpse of an idea that, you know what, maybe I want to pursue law enforcement, what made you say, if not me, then who?
I really never wanted to be in law enforcement. I grew up around it, and I always say there's two kinds of cop kids: the ones that go out and do stupid stuff, and then the ones that do, kind of lay low. And I was the one that laid low, but I still never had any interest in it. It's just not what I wanted to do. I always respected the profession, but I want to be a meteorologist, and so I love the weather still to this day. But my dad was the sheriff my last semester of college, and he's like, "Hey, just come do a ride along with one of my deputies." And I finally did, and it was one of those days that like we ran call to call to call, and like took three people to jail. And I was like, "Man, this is fun." And then he's like, "All right, now it's time to do the paperwork," and that wasn't very fun. But I realized then that like that's a necessary part of the job, and so it didn't scare me away, and I was hooked. And so I dispatched for quite a few years, 4 or 5 years, until my first police job, and my why was I wanted to serve my hometown. Um, I finally decided to get myself certified through what they call the COPS program in Oklahoma. And that was basically through a college. And I had already had my bachelor's degree. So, like, I really didn't gain anything out of it other than getting certified. I got an associate's degree after my bachelor's degree. Um, yeah, so I mean, like I did for somebody that's never been to college though, you would go through the process of getting your associates and then your bachelor's along with getting certified. But
Mhm.
I already had my bachelor's, so I actually got an associate's in criminal justice after already having my bachelor's degree, which I kind of chuckle at now. I'm working on my doctorate. And I wanted to serve my hometown. The pay sucked, the equipment sucked, but I got a lot of good hands-on police experience, and I learned how to talk to people very quickly. I'll never forget, and I use this as a training example of I let somebody get one over on me, and you think, why would you admit that you let somebody get one over on you? Because it happened, and I'm not going to shy away from it. Um, I'll never forget, I was running stationary radar. The guy was doing like 15 over in a residential neighborhood, and I stopped him, and he just started, tearing into me. And I was maybe, God, 4 or 5 months into being a cop. And he's like, "You guys are worthless. You're out here. That's all you're doing, stopping cars in the neighborhood." And I said, "Yeah, because you're doing 15 over. Like it's a residential neighborhood." Anyways, he refused to sign the ticket. And finally a partner of mine showed up. And, I could see he was kind of a veteran cop, and I still talk to him this day, but he's kind of cracking his knuckles behind, my peripheral vision. And guy's like, "I'm not signing that effing ticket." And I'm like, "Man, you're going to go to jail and you're going to get drug out that window and you're not going to like it." And he finally signed the ticket. But looking back on it, I let it drag out way too long, and he should have went to jail. I mean, I let him get way above what his piece was in, but it was because I wasn't confident in my abilities yet.
That's frustrating when that happens, but at least you learn from it and you could admit that you learned from it. That's the important thing, right?
Absolutely. And that's why I try to self reflect often because it happened. I'm not going to shy away from it. And since then, no one's got one over on me like that, But if I don't learn from that mistake, do I stay in law enforcement this long? Do I let it affect me so much that I get out of the career? And now that I'm in more of a training role, I can tell these other people like, "Hey, this happened. Don't let it happen to you. Learn from what I did wrong and apply it to your career and don't repeat my mistake I made." It wasn't a career defining mistake because God help me, every officer out there's probably done something stupid or just as worse in their career. But I'm willing to admit it and say, hey, I messed up and I learned from it.
That's one thing that I've seen get a lot of officers not just in trouble, but even fired, and they've lost their certification because they can't admit when they make mistakes. So that's an honorable trait. So I want to take you back to before when you mentioned that you went on that ride along, and it was about 4 years that you spent in dispatch before actually making the decision to, all right, now I'm going to get out on the street. What was it about that timing that made you finally make that move?
I don't think it was voluntary. Like I was trying actively to get hired on.
Okay.
But when your dad's an elected official, sometimes people may not like him or, may have a preconceived notion about him and for whatever reason, like I wasn't trying to, at the time, I was trying to apply just for bigger agencies. And this was before like, I was testing with like 80 something people. So like it was still competitive. And, for whatever reason, that never worked out. But I will say this, it worked out in a good way because I learned so much from being a dispatcher. I learned how to talk to people in their worst moments. I learned how to, do time management stuff. I learned how to prioritize. And so while it didn't move as quickly as I wanted it to, I did benefit from being a dispatcher. And so for that, I'm always grateful.
Yeah, there's something to be said about learning how to communicate over a phone when you can't actually see their body language and all you have is tone and inflection and the words that they're saying, and to be able to effectively communicate just over the phone. Dispatchers have a heck of a time, and I respect them very much for that. So that's awesome. So what was your first promotion after getting out on the street and making patrol? What was the first promotion that you went to? Did you get on SWAT or get promoted like a corporal or anything like that?
So my first actual, I'm not going to say promotion. I switched agencies before I had my first promotion.
Hmm.
I went to about the same size town, but it was more suburban. It was more closer to a metro. So I did that actually for probably 4 years as just a patrolman again, and that was a step up because we had nicer equipment. We had different style of calls. It was different people I was interacting with compared to my hometown, and so we got a lot of bleed over from Tulsa, and so we would deal with gangbangers, we would deal with drugs, weapons, vehicle chases a lot more, and that made me grow as an officer. And so then I would say my first true promotion was I was the public information officer.
Hmm.
Um, I volunteered for that because we were out there doing cool stuff every night and no one knew. And you'd get on the local social media sites and, well, they're just hanging out Taco Bueno all night or they're hanging out, IHOP. And no one cared to get that information out there enough. And so I volunteered. And I'll never forget, I went, I love the guy that sent me, but they saved $50 instead of sending me to the FBI lead a TIO class. They sent me to a private one, and literally all I did during that class that week was watch YouTube videos. He didn't actually get up and make us do practicals. He did have some good information, but like actually doing it, there wasn't any. So I got back, and they probably didn't use me for 4 months. And then they finally called me one day and said, "Hey, this illegal marijuana grow," and it was right after they just legalized medical marijuana in Oklahoma. They called me and said, "Hey, this illegal marijuana grow uh, got robbed, and the homeowners got tied up and beaten up." So I get out there. It's like 95 degrees. It's like right at like 5 o'clock news. Every news agency in Tulsa's there, and they put me looking into the sun. And so like I'm sweating profusely. As you know, I don't have much of a skin tan. And so I'm just baking in the sun, and like, I'll never forget this because I still laugh with her to this day. There's like, mix of female reporters and male reporters, and this guy asked me, or this female reporter asked me a question, and she says, whatever she asked me, I said, "Yes, sir." And so all my trooper buddies, instantly took screenshots of that and made memes of the face because I made a smirk, and they're like, "This is the face you make when you call a female reporter a sir." And I learned from that though. Again, I learned like, hey, sometimes you got to pick where you're going to do your interview at. And so I learned things not to say, and I enjoyed that role so much because I was still on patrol, but I got to dictate what we put out. And literally, we went from a agency that was, maybe posting Happy Fourth of July and Merry Christmas on Facebook to like posting almost daily. And if somebody did something cool, hey, give me the information on that. Like, hey, if you need to help find the suspect, give me the information on that. And like, we were getting the news was calling literally every day, like, hey, can you talk about this? And like, we were on the news like 3 or 4 times a week, and I feel proud of that because before they weren't doing that, and I helped get that off the ground. And so, to this day, like, I'm an advocate for using the media and working with them and not shying away from them, because when you try to hide something in the dark, the people are going to instantly think that you're purposely doing it for bad reasons. But if you're out there doing good things, people actually want to hear those things, and use the media as a relationship and don't shy away from it.
Yeah, that transparency is really important, and that PIO fills that spot very well to be able to actually get the information out there and share it in a good format where it makes sense, and the everyday citizen can see it and say, okay, yeah, they're actually doing something, as opposed to just seeing an arrest log with a list of names, date, times, locations, which doesn't really say much.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I also
And so,
like how you got that little trial by fire, that very first interview 4 months after your training. That I don't know if you were ever an FTO, but letting a rookie make a mistake is the best way for them to learn. You go out there, you get the little bit challenging case, and you let them make a mistake or two so that you can teach them what's really important, and to slow down, pay attention, and take a little bit more time or control it, whatever they need to work through it. So that was awesome that you got to experience that.
absolutely. And like I said, it was literally trial by fire. It was like 95 degrees that day. It was miserable. Worst interview I've ever done, but I can laugh at it now.
So what was your next promotion that you got?
I got promoted to corporal after that, which I enjoyed. But again, when I became corporal later on at another agency, I realized that I wasn't necessarily, I'm not going to say I wasn't ready, but I wasn't put in a position to succeed, because they put me on a shift with another corporal. And so there was always that's just how it shook out. There wasn't enough sergeants to be spread out, and they didn't want to add another one to our FOP contract. And so we had two corporals on one shift, and there was a lot of headbutting. Um, Me and her got along personally, but um, at the time we butted heads a lot because she was a senior corporal and I was just, the new corporal. At the end of the day, we had the same rank. There wasn't any such thing as a senior corporal. Um, but after I left the agency, we actually ended up getting along very well because we both admitted, like, hey, we were probably a little bit stupid during that time. And we didn't, it wasn't a bad relationship by any means while I was there. But it's hard to grow as a leader when you're sharing power with somebody at the same rank.
Yeah, that's a challenging spot to get put into, unless you sit down and come up with a good game plan and understand your roles and how you're going to work them out. And so does everybody else underneath of you and above. That, yeah, I could see that being a challenge. Anytime that I had to come over and help another shift, and I was of equal rank of a supervisor, whether it be sergeant, corporal, or whatnot, I always made sure to sit down with them and say, hey, this is your shift. I'm just an extra body. This is what I can offer. If you need me to step up, take charge for certain things, I will. But, we need to understand our roles here. And then likewise, if a supervisor of equal rank came to my shift, we'd sit down and say, okay, great, this is my shift. I'm going to run it, but I will ask you to fill certain spots here and there. But you got to have that open communication.
Absolutely. Um, and what's funny is she actually ended up promoting up to the rank. She passed away of cancer about a year ago. Um, and she actually ended up becoming a captain. And I was never so happy because we would still keep in touch. And I'll just say it, when I first started there, she wasn't happy there. Um, but she had a kid and she wanted to. We finally had a change of leadership, and once she moved up a little bit to sergeant, she excelled.
Mm-hmm.
And then she became captain, and she was like doing great. And I was so happy to hear that like she like took that next step. Like once it was presented to her, instead of being the person that's unhappy, like she was being the leader. And she did such a good job. And unfortunately, cancer is such a dirty word. Um, I hate that I don't get to talk to her anymore. But we had a lot of good memories, and I still think about those quite a bit.
It's always nice when the chessboard finally starts to play out in your favor, whether that's the administrator or the department as a whole, right? When things just start to line up and flow smoothly, that's always a good feeling at a department.
Yep.
So after that promotion to corporal, what was your next step?
Well, I got out of law enforcement during COVID. Um, with everything going on, and like I said, there was that us butting heads some. Like I was burnt out. I was about the 7 year mark, and I think every officer gets there to that point, and there's like want to do something different. When I tried going to other agencies, and for whatever reason, it didn't work out at that time. And I took an insurance job during a pandemic. Terrible idea, guys. Again, but I've learned from it because while I failed at that, on my rebound, I've started working on my master's degree and I finished that. And so now I'm working on my doctorate and I've got a year left in that. I probably would have never done that if I wouldn't have got out of law enforcement and failed, because it made me push myself in other ways to show that I'm not a failure, And so while I feel like I am qualified to speak on advising people like, hey, the grass isn't always greener over there. Um, Sometimes even if you fail, you can come back in other ways and excel.
Yeah, the pandemic was hard on a lot of officers. We saw a lot of turnover as well. That was definitely a difficult time. When you hit that rock bottom, what was it that made you decide, you know what, I got to get back into law enforcement? That's really where my heart's at.
Not being able to pay my bills, being dead serious. It was a terrible time to take a full commission job during a pandemic. And then, they sold me on the idea of, hey, you're going to be in Tulsa. It's a good sized metro. They put me in like the worst part of Tulsa to sell insurance. There's more people that didn't have insurance than did. And it just didn't work out. And so at the time, the only thing I really knew that I did well was be a cop. I didn't hate the job when I left it. I wasn't, like, oh my God, I don't ever want to talk about police work again. It was just, I was tired of the same thing over and over again. And so I got back into it. I got on at an agency that was growing due to the McGirt decision in Oklahoma, that gave tribal law enforcement a lot of expanded authority. And I worked my way up there again, and within a year, I was a corporal again there. So things work out for a reason.
Mhm.
Again, everybody's going to have things in their life that don't necessarily work out exactly how they want to, or even if you might fail a little bit, but you can come back from that.
Absolutely. So, what was your next one? Was it the moving into the training division?
Yeah, so well, my next one was the corporal, and I actually felt like that one went a lot better because I got to supervise my own shift. Um, I mean, I still had a sergeant above me, but there were 3 or 4 days a week where he wasn't there, and so like I actually got to run the shift when he wasn't there. And I felt like that one went a lot better because I got to interact with 5 to 7 officers usually at night, and they were responsible. They were responsible to me, and I got to make decisions, and I got to learn from the mistakes I did make, and I felt like it went a lot smoother the second time around. And I actually grew as an officer because I've had bad supervisor experiences before, like of dealing with supervisors. And I always told myself I'm not going to be that person. And so I always just try to treat people how I would want to be treated. And so, I interacted with them. I kind of coached them a little bit, like, hey, how's your life going? Where do you want to be 6 months from now on the job? What about a year from now? How are you going to get there? And just actually gave a shit. And I felt like it went so much better the second time around. Um, and then that's when I ended up in the training division.
So, what made you make the shift from a leadership role to the training division and coaching and mentoring?
Well, I ran a police academy for 6 months. I left again, um, and I loved it. It was a blast. The problem is they had me doing a bunch of stuff that wasn't police academy related, and I'm not kidding. They had me doing like beautician stuff and barbering stuff, EMT refreshers, stuff I had no clue about. Plus, running the police academy, and my boss currently in the training division called me one day and says, "Hey, we got a spot in the training division. Would you want to come back?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I love it. I've got a good boss. I've got a good agency I work for, but we've got 150 officers that we get to help them get to where they want to be, training wise and growth wise. And it's always nice to have the ability to be like, hey, this is like the direction we're going to go training wise. And my boss is receptive to the new ideas. And now I'm in a position where I can kind of mentor these newer officers and say, where do you want to be, 6 months from now? Where do you want to be a year from now? And be open to realizing that, hey, it might change. You may say, I want to be DRE because I love getting DUIs right now. Well, a year from now, as you get more experience, you might realize I really hate DUIs. Like I want to go work narcotics or stolen cars or um and so I get to mentor them and say, hey, like you're gonna change over your career, and like this, if it does change, this is how we can help you get to where you want to be now. And so I love the position I'm in now.
I like that. I remember back on my career early on, I had a bunch of senior officers telling me I should put in for detective, and I was trying to head down that path, and I was interested in it. Wasn't 100% bought in on it though. I never did make detective. I found out that patrol was more suiting for my personality. I liked getting out there, being involved in the chase, being out there on the front lines. If I had been put in an office and then just called to come out to the scene later after all the fun was done, I don't think that would have suited me. So it worked out well. And so I like how you're helping coach and mentor the next generation to see those benefits. Sometimes they think they're heading the right direction, but if they can truly have the right mentoring, we can keep them on track. That's going to keep them the happiest, hopefully keep them in the field or in the right path so that they stay in law enforcement.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So now that you're in the training division, is there any thoughts about what's the next goal? What's the next mission? What's the next adventure?
Yeah, eventually I would like to be a chief of police somewhere. m- you know we'll leave that discussion for another time, but maybe one day soon. But I really want to, at minimum, leave where I'm at in a better spot than when I got there. Not to say my boss did bad before I got there, and not saying the person that would come after me would do terrible, but when I decide, hey, I'm done with training, I want somebody to say, hey, they're in a pretty good spot there. And so that's my goal I'm focused on right now. But I did recently take this podcast venture over,
Hmm.
and that's probably my main focus right now is just growing this brand, this podcast, because it's another avenue of me being able to mentor and bring training to other officers because they don't have to be there in person. They can watch it in a video form, and yourself, Jeff Johnsgard, Dan Frazier, so many other great guests, even ones that are not in law enforcement that just do leadership things. And podcasting is frustrating because it doesn't grow as fast as you want it to.
Mhm.
And I have to stop and remind myself, I'll get like 20 views or 20 downloads. And, I have this sneaking suspicion in a couple years when it does start really taking off, people are going to come back and be like, man, you had some really good guests early on. And because I'm blessed to be able to have all these great views that people that I probably consider smarter than me that actually have like yourself and Jeff Johnsgard and Dan Frazier, like you guys have doctorates in like actuality, like real life doctorates in knowledge. Like I got a piece of paper when I finished mine up, and that's cool. But you guys have such a way of delivering your message, which is just as important of having that knowledge. And like people can listen to you guys. No one cares to listen to Brent Colbert talk when I talk on here.
Ah,
I want I want to bring you guys on to share your message because you guys have such a good way of delivering it.
a little bit of time, a little bit of experience. You'll get there.
Yeah.
I shoot last couple podcasts we did, I was all up in my own head using filler words, stuttering over my conversations, but I had a lot going on in my mind with an upcoming surgery. And
Yep.
so there's things in life you got to learn from it. Every time I look back and watch those podcasts, it's like, okay, what can I do better? And that's what
Yep.
you're doing. You're looking back on your life and you're saying, what can Brent do better? And that's
Absolutely.
a great way to learn. Now, this podcast is a great platform for the next generation as well. We know that they're out there, they're watching. Things will get better, and eventually you're going to start getting those guests, or you're going to figure out your method to the madness that just really gets the engagement you're looking for. So it's been a great
Absolutely.
conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, if I could say one last thing to the next generation of just first responders in general, the grass is not always greener on the other side. And before you make a rash decision of leaving the career, take 5 minutes and just picture, could you actually picture yourself doing something different? If you can, take the chance. If that's what you want, take the chance. But just remember that it's okay that if you fail, you can bounce back from that and that you can always get back in this career. It may not be the same agency, maybe at a different one, but you can always get back into it if it doesn't work out when you take that next step. And so, if that's where you think your career is headed, take that risk. And it's okay if you don't it doesn't work out because you can bounce back. That's my one nugget of advice.
I like that. It takes us full circle right back to the original question. Ask yourself, if not me, then who? If not now, then when? Go out there and inspire the change you want to see.
Absolutely. Sergeant V, you can start running the podcast if you'd like because you do very well.
Nope, not my area of expertise.
Guys, Sergeant V is always welcome on the show. He'll be back soon. I'm always here every week. Have a great day, guys.